First, we'll disconnect the fuel pump connector, which is located in the rear portion of the frame. Next, we'll purge the fuel line. Put the bike in neutral, start the engine, and allow the engine to stall. Afterwards, hold the starter button for 3 seconds. This should clear out any residual fuel in the line. First, loosen and then remove the battery strap. Next, loosen and remove the battery terminal bolts. And finally, remove the battery from its housing. Loosen and remove the left side air scoop bolts, and then remove the air scoop. Loosen and remove the right side air scoop bolts, and then remove the air scoop. Loosen and remove the bolts for the intake cover. And now, remove the intake cover. Loosen and remove the bolts on both sides of the chin cowl. And then remove the chin cowl. Loosen and remove the front fender bolts. And then remove the front fender. Remove the fuel vent tube. Disconnect the exhaust cable from the actuator. Unlock the latch tabs for the cover. And then remove the cover. Now we will remove the base plate bolts. Be careful when lifting the base plate. The IAT sensor is still connected underneath. Disconnect the IAT sensor and then remove the base plate. Disconnect the O2 sensor. Disconnect the head temperature sensor. Disconnect the ignition coil sensor. Loosen the retaining clip on the velocity stack. Once the retaining clip is loosened, remove the velocity stack. Next, we'll disconnect the fuel line, the TPS, and the fuel injectors. Unfortunately, I had the camera off when I removed the TPS and the fuel injectors, but we'll move on to the fuel line next and disconnect it. Loosen and remove the bolts on the switch housing. Remove the back of the housing. Now remove the cable from the cable wheel. Disengage the cables from the throttle body. Be careful when you're doing this, you may cause damage to a cable. Here, we're going to remove the ignition coil, first by removing the 2 fastener bolts, then we'll remove the spark plug wires, and finally remove the ignition coil. I disengaged my clutch cable by removing my brake lever. Be sure to slacken the cable adjustment in front of the bike first. All mufflers will differ, so remove the retaining bolts and then remove the muffler. Now we'll loosen the pinch bolts and the rear axle. Turn the axle 15 revolutions or more in order to loosen the belt. Loosen and remove the bolts for the idler pulley bracket, and with a rubber mallet, remove the bracket. Now we can remove the belt by gently rotating and pulling on the belt until it easily walks off. With the rubber mallet, we'll gently tap the idler pulley bracket and remove. Loosen and remove the bolts for the kickstand. And then remove the kickstand. This is my setup for supporting the bike. Initially I had the jack toward the middle of the bike, but when I started to lower it, it was causing me issues. So I moved the jack to the front of the bike where it could evenly distribute the weight as I lowered the bike. The jack stands are just here as a precautionary measure as I start to loosen and remove the retaining bolts for the engine. Loosen and remove the wire form screw. Disengage the front tie bar from the engine by loosening and removing its retaining bolt, and then remove the clutch P-clip from the tie bar. Disengage the rear tie bar by loosening and removing its retaining bolt. Loosen and remove the retaining bolts for the tie bar, and then remove the tie bar. Next, we're going to remove the V-bracket bolts. We'll start with the right upper bolt first. Then we'll move over and get the upper left bolt. And finally, we'll remove the lower left bolt. Next, we'll remove the steering dampener. If your bike does not have a steering dampener, feel free to skip ahead. Loosen and remove the isolator bolt. The isolator bolt should come out easily. If you find yourself having difficulty removing the bolt, raise the jack up or down to correct any alignment issues, and then remove the bolt. You may not need to remove the front isolator assembly, but for the work that I was doing, I needed the extra room, so I removed it. After you remove the jack stands from the bike, and we're starting to lower the bike, make sure that you're lowering the bike in an even progression. If you find yourself unsure, just stop and make sure that nothing is binding or catching along the way. Well, you've now completed the engine rotation. Hopefully this video has helped you in some form or manner. If it didn't, well, you can leave it down in the comments. If it did, do the same.